Hi, and welcome to this session. So previously, back a few weeks ago, there was a really great workshop post AutoCon 1 that I was lucky enough to go to, which was hosted by the guys at NetBox Labs and also the guys behind Netpicker and Slurp'it. And this event was all about looking at those tools, how you can integrate them together to achieve various use cases. And so what I wanted to do is show you those tools today, how they integrate at a high level, so you just know what they're all about, and you know the kind of the key takeaways in terms of their benefits and what you can really do with them within your network to be able to kind of drive network automation. So let's dive in. Okay, so these are the three tools that we're going to look at today: NetBox, Slurp'it, and Netpicker. Now, I'm sure you've already heard of NetBox. So NetBox is a source of truth. You store your intended state, and then you use this intended state for documentation purposes or to drive automation, either automated tests or automated config, whatever you want to use that data within your intended source of truth for. And then we've got Slurp'it, which is going to allow us to discover data from the network. We've got Netpicker that we're going to use for testing. And then we're also going to lean upon a couple of tools to be able to then do some automated deployment out to a network. So using that data from NetBox, so we're going to use Nornir and Napalm, and we're also going to leverage GraphQL to get the data from NetBox. Now, the workflow that we're going to be working through today is going to look like this. So we're going to discover our network using Slurp'it. So there's a Slurp'it NetBox plugin, and we're going to populate NetBox with this data. For our example, we're just going to do this with a couple of devices, just 2 spine devices. So we've got this data then within NetBox. And then what we're going to use that data within NetBox as a kind of inventory to be able to then perform our network validation using Netpicker. So we've got the discovery happening, got the network compliance, and then we're going to also pull the data from NetBox using GraphQL to generate our config using Ginger. And then we're going to deploy out that config, that rendered config, using Nornir and Napalm. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to quickly look at is NetBox. So NetBox is a source of truth, allows you to hold all of your data about your network intent. It's backed by a relational database. So it's a relational database type of source of truth, has a UI, and it allows you to drive automation because you can get your data out from it using various APIs, Ansible collections, etc., etc. So it's a really, really popular source of truth out in the market at the moment. And you can store in here your devices. Got some examples here. You can model out your interfaces, etc., etc. So it's a model, it's an opinionated model, so it gives you the model for you to populate. Some of the other things you can do with NetBox as well is you can model your devices, you can model things at more of a kind of like a physical level, so like sites, geographical regions, etc. And on top of that, one thing that I really like about NetBox is that you can model your racks, and then you can create elevations. And these elevations are, the things that you would typically be doing back in the day within Excel spreadsheets, using tables that you would export out into like your LLDs, etc. And you can do all of that within NetBox. Build out your elevations, get those images out. So it's a great tool, but one of the things and one of the, I would say, caveats with it is you need to populate it with what's within your network. And that can take time because you've got to click through various screens, etc., etc. And so what we can do is we can use a tool, a discovery tool, to populate NetBox for us. And that kind of brings us on to the next tool that we're now going to look at, which is Slurp'it, which is all about discovery. Now, getting data from your network, it's one of those things that sounds easy, but there's actually quite a few nuances to it, i.e., you might have multiple different device types, like vendor types. So you've got to go out to them, get the data back, present it, and get it together within a single format. where do you put this data once you've got it? Okay, well, you're going to need to place it into a database. Okay, well, I want to get the data out from that database. Well, I'm going to then need to build myself an API. I might need to, I want to look at that data within that database. So I need some kind of query option. All of these different things when it comes to discovery. And it can be a pain, right? So this is what Slurp'it provides you with. It provides you with a tool that does all of that for you. So we've got Slurp'it here. So you can check out Slurp'it via the website. Now, this is kind of a high level of the architecture. So you have your network. You can do a certain level of scanning to discover what's out within your network using SNMP. But then once Slurp'it knows who to scrape, it can go out. It goes out via SSH. It uses NetMiko under the hood, so it supports a lot of different vendor types. So it goes out, pulls this data back, uses TextFSM as well to get any raw data into structured data, and it places that within the database that you can then query either using the UI or a REST API. And there's also an SDK that's come out as well, and that also supports data frames if you want to work with it using the Pandas library. So what Slurp'it also allows you to do is it also allows you to discover this data, but then easily place that into NetBox. Okay, and that's what I'm gonna show you today. So first of all, I'm going to quickly show you just the UI, and I'm going to show you a couple of cool features in some of the things that it can do. And then we'll look at the plugin, basically using Slurp'it to discover that data and bring that into NetBox. So we've got Slurp'it here, and you can either use the Slurp'it sandbox environment, or you can pull down the images and build it using Docker Compose. And I've just built this within the lab just using Docker Compose. And so I'm just going to talk about a couple of the key features that you need to know about with Slurp'it. One, you've got the NetBox plugin that allows you to synchronize your data from Slurp'it, place that into NetBox. But what we've got here is to be able to understand and tell Slurp'it about what devices to basically scrape within the network. You can bring in those devices in manually or via an API import. But what you can also do is use the device finder. And what the device finder does is it has a couple of different options. You can either use SNMP to crawl a network to look for devices and their device types that it can go out to then scrape. Or the really great thing about it is it's got a crawler feature. So what it allows you to do, allows you to go out to a certain amount of devices, crawl them, and from the data it gets back from them, i.e. the CDP, LLDP, etc., use that data and the IPs within that data to be able to then go out to those, to be able to crawl those. And so it acts a bit like a spider. So it kind of crawls through the network. So you can add your devices in. And then once you've got the devices in, Slurp'it is then going to scrape over those devices to bring data back. And it places those into these different tables. And that's what we've got here. So you get all your data back within these tables. And you can do a certain level of filtering here. So, show me the devices here. They've just got EM2 within the interface name. So we've got that. And you can export this data out in different formats as well, which is nice. So you've got all of this data here that it's bringing back, and all of this data here we can also consume via the API as well. You can add your own templates in as well. It uses TextFSM under the hood, but let's say there's not a TextFSM parsing template available to be able to go out to whatever device you've got, bring the data back into structured data. You can write your own templates and run that and use that against the command. So it might be that there's some strange feature on your Huawei device you can't find a template for. You can write a template, add the show command into Slurp'it and get that data back in. And so it's very, very customizable. So on top of that, what you can also do is you can modify basically a data schema to make sure that all of the data coming back from these different devices are placed within a single format. So what do I mean by that? So we can go into planning and we can go into here, we can go into one of these tables and we can use report columns. And what this allows us to do is to say, based on the data against the different keys, the data that we've got coming back from the devices, place them against a common key. So it might be that we've got data coming back from our Cisco device and the ARP age is marked against expire, but on another device, Junos or something, is coming back as aging. And so you can then take and massage that data into a common key like so. And that's what we've got here, age. And so even though you've got the data coming through these templates as structured data and the keys might be different, you can get them into a common format and then you can pull the data out against all of these different vendor types as a common format. So really, really nice. And that's another great feature. So what we've got and what we're going to use Slurp'it for today is for populating NetBox. And so there's a NetBox plugin. So you can go in settings, click here. So you give it your URL, give it your API key. You click sync on the various options. And then what you do is just click test API, save, and that's going to go out and link this to your NetBox instance. So within NetBox, once you've installed the Slurp'it plugin, you can go down to here, see the Slurp'it plugin, go to settings. You can choose the option that you want to use. So in this case, we're just going to use the push. So we're just going to push data from Slurp'it out to NetBox. And what we can do is we go on to onboard devices. And it's going to show us the devices that has been discovered by Slurp'it that it wants to onboard into NetBox. So these are the devices that aren't currently within the NetBox device tables, and we're going to import these two here. So we click on these, click on onboard. And then before it onboards it into NetBox, it's going to give us various options in terms of the different device attributes and settings to set against that device. So for example, for our device role, these are going to be spine devices. The site is going to be our Berlin data center. And then you can add more in as well. So we've got our tenant is going to be Uber Coffees. We apply this. You see that they're not in the onboard devices section now. Now, if we go into devices and we look at spine 1, spine 2, you can see we've got the IP address, got spine 1, spine 2, and we are good to go. We've populated those two devices within NetBox. So let's now look at Netpicker. So Netpicker is a network compliance tool. And the way to think about Netpicker is if you was running some tests against your network, let's say you're using PyTest or you're using some form of framework, you're gonna have a few questions. Typically, and it's kind of dovetails a little bit into what we were saying about Slurp'it before, but the questions might be, how do I schedule the tests against my network to run at a certain time every day, right? How do I store all of those results somewhere, like in a database? How do I then get the results from that database and place them into like some kind of meaningful reports that I can look at and visualize to see what's going on within the network? And all of those things are typical questions that you normally have when you go down the road of the automated testing path. Now, that's what Netpicker provides us with. It allows us to go out to devices, automate the tests, write custom tests using the PyTest testing framework, store the results within a database, and then visualize via reports the results. So that's what I'm just going to show you now, and just going to touch upon also then some of the kind of, again, key features that you can get from Netpicker. So again, with Netpicker, you can go into their sandbox and kick the tires in a pre-deployed environment if you want, or you can download and pull down the Docker images and build this via build an environment just using Docker and Docker Compose as well. So what you can do with Netpicker is, first of all, you can bring in devices from a source, and that includes a source such as NetBox, and that's what we've done here. We've imported these in from NetBox. We've got our two devices, our two spine devices here. You can also import this in from Slurp'it or CSV if you want to. And so you create a vault, which allows you to define the credentials. So Netpicker is going to know at this point the IP address to go out to via the vault, the credentials to be able to kind of authenticate itself to the device. And then once you've got your devices set up, what you can do is you can schedule backups. So you can run your backups to run a certain time every day. You can see the different backups. And you can also then see what's changed within your backup as well. And because this was initial backup, this is just going to show the differential being the complete backup being taken. And then what we can also do is we can then also build out our testing policies. So you build out a policy, and then within your policy, you build out your tests. Now, so you get a number of tests created out of the box against SysN, the CVE level tests. And so you can extend them out if you want, and you can also then build out your own tests. So you can dive into here, see all the different tests that have been pre-created for you. So we've just built out a policy here called interface tests. And so within your policy, then you build out your rules. So one rule here. And what we've said is we've given it a rule name, told it about the platform that this test is going to run against, given the rule of severity. And then within the conditions, this is where you build out your actual test. So this is based on Python, so the PyTest framework. And PyTest is based on using the assert Python keyword, the built-in keyword. And basically what you do is you put into values and an expression. And if this is not true, the assert is going to raise an exception. And it's the framework that's going to come along at the point that it runs these functions, and it's going to catch these exceptions and then mark the test as failed. And if there's no exception raised, it's going to mark the test as passed. And that's what you do here. You use the assert to validate two values. So what we've got here is we create a function. We're going to pass in the configuration. So we're going to have the configuration available that it's pulled from those config backups. And then we're going to pass in any command. So we're passing in all the data really that we might need for our tests to be able to perform our assert statement. And so against our test function, we add this decorator. So we place in here, whether it's a medium severity or high, etc. We give our rule a name, and then we tell it about the platform type, and then the commands that we want it to run. And so it's going to run show interfaces, and it's going to mark the output of show interfaces against this key. Okay. So what we can then do, so we pass in these inputs. We've got this command from here. And then we're going to loop over our command data. So within commands, we've got that key, the interfaces that we've built here. So we're going to step into that. Now that's going to, at this point, give us the raw data for our interface, basically our show interfaces output. But we want that as structured data to work with. So we're going to put .fsm on the end here. And that's going to give us that text. It's going to pass it through, that raw data through the text FSM template and give us the data back as structured output. So this is then going to step through each of the interfaces within that structured output. And then we're going to get the MTU. We're going to get the interface name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to validate that MTU value against the expected value, which is 1500. Where are we going to use that interface name? So we're actually going to pass that in to here. And this is going to be the text that is going to be displayed at the point that this test fails. So we know what the issue is at the point of failure. There's also the ability to use NetBox as basically the source data. So you do have the NetBox object available to you. So you can just pass into here, NetBox, and off of there, then consume the various data that you've got within NetBox within your tests as well. You can run debug to also then validate that your test is running as expected. And it's going to come back, it's run, it's going to show us the command output from what we've run here. But it's also going to show us the issue around, or the result of the test. And the result of the test at the moment is that one of the interfaces has come back with the incorrect MTU value, which is loop back 0. So you can build up your tests, you can run these against the devices, you can schedule them and have them run every day, etc. And then bring in all of those results that you can then view within here and to see what has passed, what has failed, and then build out and look at different reports. So let's build a report here. We're going to use all of our test policies, test report. And then we get a full breakdown of what's passed and what's failed at a really granular level. So really, really nice. So we've got the test in there. So we can test out and validate that our interfaces are correct, for example, on our two spine devices. So we've discovered the data from just a couple of devices, passed that into NetBox. We've then moved into Netpicker and we've pulled some data from the network. We've done some testing and we've used the devices that we've learned from the network via Slurp'it, and we've pulled that in from NetBox. And then the next thing that we're going to want to do is we want to consume the data that we've got within NetBox to build out some config and deploy that out to our spine devices. So to do this, what we've done is we've built out a small project using Nornir and using Napalm and also Ginger. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all connect Nornir to our NetBox instance using a plugin. Before we move on, if you don't know Nornir, it's very similar to Ansible. However, it's 100% Python. And so what do I mean by that? Because, is Ansible not Python? Well, Ansible is Python, but you drive Ansible using a YAML DSL, i.e. the playbooks. So all the playbooks are defined in YAML, and then that gets translated under the hood within Ansible into Python, and it then does what you need it to do. But Ansible's really, really good, but it can be a bit slow. And so Nornir is a nice kind of lean, pure Python alternative that allows you to basically declare your, if you like, your playbooks in 100% Python. So we're going to link Nornir into NetBox using the NetBox plugin. So we're going to use and declare that plugin here. We're going to bring in for this plugin our NetBox FQDN, so how it can reach out to it, and the token, because it's going to reach out to the API of NetBox to be able to bring those devices in as an inventory. So before we move on, let's just check that this is working. So this is going to basically go out to NetBox and just print us the inventory data, right? Just to make sure that connectivity is working. And this is all that we've got within the code, right? Going to bring in our config file that I just showed you a minute ago. And we're just going to, against the object that we build from this config file, which is going to be nr, after we do this initialization, we're going to look at the inventory object. We're going to pull it out as a dictionary. This is going to show us our data, right? So we're going to need to have these two devices in NetBox coming down as an inventory, because we're going to go against each of those devices to, one, render the config, and then also to push that config, that rendered config we've got out to the devices. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to build the config. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go out to NetBox using GraphQL, and we're going to pull back all of the data that we need to be able to pass that into our Ginger template to be able to render our config. So we build a single GraphQL query here with all of the data that we need to get back. We're going to do our GraphQL query. We're going to also then build out our template. So we've got a template here. We're going to build out the interface data, OSPF, etc. And so we're going to build out the GraphQL query, build out some other, populate some other variables for our NetBox FQDN and token. And then we're going to build out our tasks. So our tasks are basically what we're going to perform against each of our devices. We're going to have two tasks. One, to pull the data back, the GraphQL data, and then to pass that data into the template to build the config out to render that using Ginger. So here, it's going to use requests. We're going to send that query out I showed you a minute ago. We're going to get that data back. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use that data to be able to populate our Ginger template. So basically what we're doing here is this task. We're running this task, GraphQL task, basically within this task. So it's kind of like a nested task. So, but ultimately, once we've got this data back from NetBox using GraphQL, it's that data that we're going to pass into our Ginger template. And we're going to run another task, which is going to be our template file task, which is going to be the rendering and deal with the rendering of our Ginger template using this data here. And then we're going to write this data to a file. So our rendered output to a file, which we're going to output here within this location. Okay. So let's now build our config. So do the nr build script, and this is going to show us, if we go through the output from near, it's going to show us all of the output that we've got back from GraphQL for each of our devices. And it's all of this data that we're then passing into our Ginger template. So our custom fields, our interface data, etc., etc. So we're getting all of that back as one, basically data payload that we can then work with. So we don't have to do multiple calls, which is a big benefit of using GraphQL over rest. So with our configs generated here, which is all good. So we're going to look at our Nornir script now to deploy the config out using Napalm. So we're going to use the Nornir Napalm plugin. I'm going to build some variables up here. So like the absolute path to get to our output folder. We're going to bring in from our environment variables, our username and our password, so we can connect out to the device. And so what we're going to do is just create one task. So deploy config task. And we are going to use this Napalm configure plugin. We're going to read in our config from here, which is where our rendered config lives. And we're going to then push that out to our device. And we're not going to do a full replace, we're just going to do a merge. So replace equals force. Down here, deploy, we've pushed this out. We've pushed out our new config that we've rendered. You can see here, we've got spine 1, and it's pushed this out to spine 1, and these are all of the changes that it's made against that device. So as we would change the attributes and settings within NetBox, we can then render our config, render new config, and push that out to our devices. So we've got that source of truth within our automation workflow, if you like. So to build this into a true workflow, you could use something like CI/CD, for example, so a kind of a Git-based triggered workflow. But those are all of those different components coming together to each achieve and perform a specific task. So let's just recap what we've done here. We've got NetBox, which we wanted to populate because it was brownfield. We wanted to populate some devices that we'd discovered from within the network. And to do that, we used Slurp'it as the discovery tool of choice. Then we used Netpicker, and we built and used first of all, we built the tests. We then used the data as like an inventory from NetBox to define who we're going to actually test within the network. And so we did that testing in that network compliance level at the Netpicker stage. And then we leveraged Napalm and Nornir and Ginger to bring that data from NetBox, render some config, and deploy that out to our devices. So, even in this example, we've populated NetBox with the data from the network using Slurp'it. We could then, if we wanted to go in, change and add more data within NetBox to then alter those final artifacts in that config that we're rendering out and pushing out to our devices. So really, that's what I wanted to cover today, and just to kind of show you some of those kind of key features of Slurp'it and Netpicker, and of course NetBox. Hopefully you found it useful, and if you want to learn any more about Slurp'it and Netpicker, here are the links. You can go out to these links, and I've got the link here to the GitHub repo where you can get all the code from this demo if you want to try this out for yourself as well. So thanks for watching. Have a great day and happy automating.